and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a really good way to wind up a week. And this is the last day of this week. Jose and I are going to go into the period of suffering again. 2 days of no tall tales, 70 hours, 70 hours. No tall tales, no tailgaters, no phone calls. No Facebook. It's going to be tough, but we've done it before, and by gosh, I think we can make it again. So here we are today on another episode of Tall Tales, and I'm going to start out with Zemi Ikotny. And this is, the PDN, of course, has to pick up with the leftist propaganda about climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. Our view, rising sea levels are a real threat to island nations. The effect of global warming was made crystal clear this week, much to the dismay of many of our neighbors in the Federated States. Coastal flooding caused by king tides and storm surge was rampant in islands across that nation recently, with ocean water inundating areas, often damaging crops. There wasn't any warning about the flood, and we were surprised by the sudden rush of water, said Glenn Johnny, a 28-year-old resident of Polowat-Chuk. I believe our taro patch and our source of food will be affected. It will take a few weeks to show where the salt water ruined our crops, said Johnny. Currently, the FSM government still hasn't put together the extent of damage. Global warming is real. I just read it here in the Daily News. As is climate change, which is clearly evident to ocean communities such as Marianas and Micronesia. Global warming has caused glaciers and ice sheets across the world to melt, adding water to the ocean. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the volume of the ocean expands as water warms. Now, I'd have never thought of that in a million years. Water expands as it warms, unless you're cooling it off. Now, believe it or not, water, when you cool water, contracts until you get down to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And guess what happens then? It starts to expand. And when it hits 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it freezes and it really starts to expand. But that's the least of our problems here. The sea level has risen about 8 to 9 inches since 1880. With about a third of that coming in the last 2.5 decades, NOAA states. In 2020, global mean sea level was 3.6 inches above the 1993 average. Higher water levels translate into deadly and destructive storm surges that push farther inland than before, NOAA states. It also means more frequent high tide flooding, which isn't particularly deadly or dangerous, but it's disruptive and expensive. Just ask FSM residents. And high tide flooding is only expected to get much worse in the future with continuing rising seas, according to NOAA. The industrial nations of the world, from Europe to the Americas to Asia, which produce the vast bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions causing global warming, must take action, according to Al Gore. They must significantly reduce emissions and other measures that will make a real difference, especially to island nations, in addressing the destructive and damaging impact of climate change? Well, let's suppose that tomorrow we turned off every single outlet that burns anything that puts carbon into the air. How long would it take before there would be any effect felt in small islands in the Pacific?
You're going to have to ask my descendants.
Right. Yeah, this whole thing has taken on an almost quasi-religious aspect. The only way to avoid the apocalypse is you've got to sacrifice. You've got to do away with burning oil and gasoline. Leave your cars at home and walk wherever you're going, which I already do, by the way.
Do you see a parallel here on how the left handles news as opposed to how, well, I don't say left or right, how fearmongers handle news? Things are happening, we don't understand them, so we start to panic and declare all these things bad and then separate and demonize people.
Exactly.
Sounds like the pandemic.
It really does, and there is a definite pattern there. Now, you don't have to be a climatologist to know that the temperatures on Earth have been changing ever since there's been an Earth. There was a little ice age in the 1700s where it got so cold that the Thames froze. And you could walk across the Thames. People they had a carnival in London on the Thames because it froze. We've had much warmer temperatures than what we're dealing with right now. So if temperatures change, that's just part of the Earth. I have not yet signed up for the idea that men, by burning fossil fuels, can bring about a significant change in the climate of the Earth. It's possible, but, as soon as I hear things like, every single member, every one of the 432 members of the Academy of Global Warming have voted that this is real. When I hear people voting on things that are supposed to be scientific determinations, call me out. That's not how science works. Science is not a democracy. In order for you to say that something is scientifically proven, you got to be able to do it. And then you've got to be able to describe it in such a manner that somebody else can do it. If you can't do that, then don't talk about science. And I think that's kind of where we are with this whole man-made climate change.
Well, those kind of things lead to hoaxes like the whole carbon footprint credit scheme that happened, starting with Al Gore, where you paid money to these corporations for somebody else to be good with the environment.
Exactly.
You can do whatever you want to, as long as you paid into it.
And of course, all of these things like the climate, carbon credits, et cetera, require what? A large government to operate them. So the secret to all of these problems is always a larger government. Okay, then I'm going to go to the Daily News. I'm not going to spend much time on the Daily News editorial. I'm going to read one of the columnists. I read this guy every week, and I haven't gone on the air with him, but today I will. The Daily News editorial, the headline, "With the Omicron variant probably already on Guam, CDC and GovGuam urge full vaccination booster shot." You don't need to go any farther than that. It's the same old stuff. Once again, there's only one correct answer here. Any of the other things that we hear about the virus, about the vaccine not being safe, the vaccine not being effective, all of those other, forget it. If there's a shot, just go down and stick your arm out and let somebody poke you with a needle. That's the post.
You know what I learned about science? You ask questions, and you seek the answers to your questions.
Yeah.
Not the definitive.
Yeah, not you come up with a narrative, and then you go out and you try to make a scientific, you engage in some kind of scientific, quote unquote, undertaking to prove up your narrative or fill the holes in your narrative. That's how it works nowadays. Okay, next, instead of reading the Post editorial, I'm going to read Father, what's his name?
Father Fran?
Yeah, Father
Fran Hiesel.
Yeah, he pronounces it Hiesel. I pronounce it Hetzel. H-E-Z in German would be Hetzel, not Hiesel. But I guess I'll defer to him today. Yeah, and the title of his column is Our Strange Appetite for War. Why is it that Americans seem to need war to be happy? It's not that we start wars exactly, but we embrace them with a strange fervor when they break out. Are we the only ones in the world who have ever exhibited this strange addiction? Hell no. That's kind of the way of the world.
Since ever since.
Yeah. I just read an article the other day that Genghis Khan caused climate change by killing 40 million human beings. Yeah.
Must be true.
Yeah. Genghis was in charge of the largest empire the world has ever seen. And he did it all in a warlike manner.
They ate a lot of beef.
Yeah. No, there are great powers of the past who have sent their armies continually expand their empires. Just think of Alexander the Great, or the Roman Empire, or the Mongolian forces led by Genghis Khan. But the goal of these people was to acquire more land and extend their rule over as many nations as they could. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't that... No! The C word? The dreaded C? Isn't that colonialism? You mean these great historical figures like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan were colonizers? Oh my gosh. And sometimes their names are mentioned in our school books. Imagine that. A grand empire is not what interests America. Oddly enough, Americans seem to need war to define ourselves. War takes the shape of a great moral contest to define ourselves, not just to underscore those values we stand for, but also those we firmly oppose. Often we headline this battle between democracy and tyranny, between freedom and slavery. And that's true. If you look back on American history, there's always this tension between what's referred to as realpolitik and the politics of ideology. In World War I, according to President Woodrow Wilson, we went to war in Europe to make the world safe for democracy. It was easy to state this appetite during World War II when the fate of democracy and possible the future of the U.S. itself was threatened by fascists on the battlegrounds of Europe and the Pacific. After 4 years, that war ended, or perhaps only changed shape when the Soviets became our new foes during the post-war years of the Cold War. We might have shivered at the prospect of being vaporized by a nuclear blast, but at least none of us had any problem identifying our enemy during those 40 years. I think the Cold War lasted a little longer than 40 years. The wars continued through the years. Korea, Vietnam, the spate of little wars began in the Middle East with Iraq and Afghanistan. The reasons for going into battle might have been varied, some of them more reasonable than others. But my purpose here is not to pass judgment on the decision to take up arms. It's to bring to light a pattern in U.S. military operations. Wars, big or small, is always an opportunity to define itself as the nation upholding liberty throughout the world. Life is a battle between the freedom that we claim to cherish so dearly and those forces that would deny others that freedom. In other words, the war, real or imagined, was a conflict that pitted good guys against bad guys, just like in those old Western movies that we watched years ago. I got news for you, Father Fran. I still watch them. One of the best movies ever made was High Noon. And whenever it's on Channel 39, you can bet that I'm going to be watching it. When the international wars and threats of wars ended, many Americans became restless. Peace might have been a welcome relief for a time, but it may have left us with the old question, how are we to define ourselves these days without an enemy? Who are we? What do we stand for? It's so much easier to answer those questions when there is a force that embodies all we stand against. He's absolutely right. There's nothing more unifying than a foreign war.
Even personal battles define who you are.
Exactly, yeah. We might hope that at some point we Americans will be able to drop our craving for war. We might hope that we learn to define ourselves and our values without the need to do battle with those wearing black hats. Well, that's a dangerous black hat. Whoa. Sports, with its hard-fought contests, might have been a surrogate at one time, but it doesn't seem to do the job anymore. Apparently, neither do the video games that are all a passion these days. I can tell you what happened with sports. Unfortunately, the capitalist forces of our country took the sport out of sports. They've ruined baseball and basketball with rule changes. They've made it so expensive that, Joe Everyman really can't afford to go to. When I was a kid, a cheap afternoon was for a family, was to go to a Cubs game, even though you had to drive down to Chicago, because it didn't cost that much to get in. Popcorn was cheap. The old man could have a couple of beers without breaking the bank. Not anymore. When a nation like the U.S. runs out of foreign enemies that threatens its passionately held values, must we turn to civil war to find enemies within our own borders? Well, not this time around, because we're opening the borders to our enemies and let them flood in without papers. This seems to be just what we have done. The two blocs in the country, each claiming to stand for freedom, are engaged in what is more than a political squabble. The contest between them increasingly seems more like a war with death threats, guns, and violent protests. The political issues that divide the two parties might shift from one month to the next, but their passion for freedom persists. Freedom of a woman to kill that unborn, innocent, helpless baby within her body. Yeah. So does the animosity of one side for the other. Let's just call this our latest war. We hope that at some point we Americans will be able to drop our craving for war. We might hope that we learn to define ourselves and our values without the need to do battle with those wearing black hats. Christmas season is an opportune time to reflect this strange need of ours and take the first steps in changing our mindset. After all, this is the season in which we sing peace on earth and goodwill to men. Will we ever really settle for peace? Really nice piece of writing here by Father Fran. I'm not ready to stack arms, but it's a very nice piece of writing.
It still makes me want to go to battle. There's a couple of things I might take.
Yeah.
I'm glad he introduced Christmas and Christianity at the end of the piece, because this whole essay is based in the mindset of a Christian mindset, and not just because Christianity is good versus the black hats, but this whole piece on earth has to do with engaging other things other than these worldly matters, because there's a higher moral authority that we have to answer to, which we don't seem to be doing these days.
No, we don't. We seem to turn our back on it as fast as we can.
Or create our own deities on earth.
Right. And again, getting into partisan politics, the left has done its best to secularize our country, and they've been very, very successful at it. And we're paying for it right now.
The real battle might be between our Creator and us on earth.
Well, I watch Channel 3 sometimes, keep my wife happy. and I do read a couple of emails, the Catholic thing and a couple of other things. And there are theologians who say we're at the beginning of the end times. All the signs are there. So something to think about. In the meantime, a very thoughtful piece. You don't have to agree with all of it. Maybe you don't even need to agree with any of it, but it's certainly something that engages your brain housing group. So on that basis, for the first time in the history of Tall Tales, A man of the cloth is awarded the coveted Blue Star. Yeah. Okay. I had a piece here for Second Amendment that I almost forgot. Let me go back to the Second Amendment here for a moment. And this is from Tom Knighton. Understanding how gun control hurts ordinary people. We are told that gun control is meant to impact criminals. While it's going to make life difficult for ordinary Americans, well, that's just collateral damage. But isn't that just the price we need to pay if we want to reduce crime? The problem with that is we know it's complete, total BS. Other than that, it's fine. Criminals aren't dissuaded by laws. They find ways around them. That's why they're called criminals. They'll buy a stolen gun. They'll get someone else to buy one for them. No matter what you throw up to prevent them from doing so, they find a way to do it. In Europe, they convert non-functional weapons into functional ones just to have weapons to sell. But over at our sister site town hall, Philip Riboli hit on a metaphor to show just how much gun control hurts ordinary folks. For many Americans, the last 24 months or so likely comprised the most difficult span of time they've ever faced. Our nation was pummeled by pandemic, economic downturn, political and social upheaval. Yet when the history of 2020, 2021 is written, the most shocking and infuriating aspect should be that federal and state laws prevented Americans from protecting themselves against the violent riots that erupted around the country. And of course, I know the name of one guy who was an exception to this inability to protect himself. I won't mention his name on the air, but his initials are Kyle Rittenhouse. And, you know, I know the left hates him, but to me, Kyle Rittenhouse is kind of a symbol of where we have to be as long as the left keeps eroding our government and it interferes with governmental functions. As long as we have district attorneys that won't prosecute criminals and city councils that want to defund the police and on, there's no other choice. Imagine this scenario. You wake up coughing in the middle of the night. Your house is full of smoke. You rush your spouse and kids out to the street to escape the flames that are licking the walls of your home. You dial 911 and the operator tells you the fire department has been told to stand down and not respond to calls. Desperate to save everything you've built, you run to fetch a hose to put out the fire yourself. But when you turn on the spigot, nothing comes out. You forgot that the city you lived in is determined that if you ever need to put out a fire with your garden hose, you must first seek permission. And in order to get that permission, you need not only wait several days, but also pay several $100s to cover administrative fees for your city to process your application. In the meantime, your home and all the irreplaceable mementos inside go up in smoke and turn to ash. Does this seem far-fetched? To the millions of recent first-time gun owners, it seems far too familiar. That's because it exemplifies a bureaucratic bloat that's weighing down our democracy and burying our God-given rights that are enshrined in our founding documents. He's absolutely right. That's exactly what it's like. Of those who propose private gun ownership will look at this and roll their eyes. They'll try and make light of it and point out the differences. But so what? Yes, there are differences between running water and a gun. Yes, people don't use water hoses to kill people. However, those differences are irrelevant when it's you and yours in danger. You just care that the government's failing to protect your family is also tripping over itself to prevent you from protecting them. I've always found it interesting that the places with the highest crime rates, our large cities, are also the areas most likely to favor gun control. I'm not shocked by it, mind you. They favor it because they've been told it's the answer to their problem. So, of course, that's what they want. But we know that criminals don't obtain government guns legally. They get them through illicit means any chance they get. The laws simply don't do anything to stop them. Their potential victims, on the other hand, well, we know that how that story goes now, don't we? These folks can't get guns without jumping through a whole lot of hoops, and before they do it, they're victimized. It shouldn't be this way, but some really think gun control is an answer when it's really the problem. Good use of an analogy there. All right, let's go on to the card. And the first item on the card, it's the same, all of these items on the card that aren't local are always about the same aspect of our country. And it comes right back to what Father Fran is talking about the Civil War. And the way the other side wants to take our country, I ain't running up the white flag, I'll tell you that. Okay, this is by one of my two favorites. You know how much I like Jonathan Turley. The other one is Victor Davis Hanson. So I'll come back to this right after this short break.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh has done it again, serving up yet another new and improved sub, the Cali Fresh Steak, loaded with tender, flavorful marinated steak on top of thick-cut hickory smoked bacon, smashed avocado, and fresh mozzarella. The Cali Fresh Steak is protein-packed to leave you feeling full and satisfied. Cali Fresh Steak is made on our freshly baked hearty multigrain bread layered with fresh veggies of your choice. Subway, eat fresh.
Hafude, konnichiwa.
Patois. Ciao. Enter for a chance to win the 76 Circle K World Cuisine Giveaway. Be one of 3 lucky winners to win a passport of free food from around the world at over 15 different local restaurants. Just stop by any 76 Circle K, purchase $35 or more in fuel to get an entry form. Drive by today and taste the world with 76 Circle K's World Cuisine Giveaway. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more details. Some conditions apply. Circle K, take it easy.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So there we go. If you never read anything by anybody but these 3 guys, you could consider yourself extremely well educated. Jonathan Turley, Victor Davis Hanson, and Thomas Sowell. That's the hat trick of really good writing. Here's today's from Victor Davis Hanson. The woke got what they wanted. And then what? The woke movement was giddy after January 2021. The left controlled both houses of Congress. Joe Biden was drafted as the necessary veneer of 1980s Democratic normality to ram through an otherwise hard left agenda. All the major cultural, financial, economic, entertainment, and media institutions had played various roles in seeing former President Donald Trump not just defeated, but also impeached twice, once after he left office. But there were real grounds for impeachment. Do you remember the grounds for impeachment? Donald Trump has a crappy personality. If that isn't grounds for impeachment, nothing else is.
To the gallows.
Tom was written off as a persona non grata, Trump was written off as a persona non grata after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. So academia, corporate boardrooms, Hollywood, the media, the Pentagon, professional sports teams, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street, in near hysterical fashion, all boarded up all boarded the woke train, all boasted of ferreting out white rage and hiring legions of diversity, equity, and inclusion czars. Critical race theory would be mainstreamed to excise racism and discrimination by embracing racism and discrimination. I got to read that sentence again. Critical race theory would be mainstreamed to excise racism and discrimination by embracing racism and discrimination. Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? Crime was to be seen now mostly as a construct created by the elite to protect their own privilege, prerogatives, and property. Shoplifting, looting, and street thuggery were just part of living in a normal city. Get over it. Social justice warriors could replace defunded police. Gone would be most bail, incarceration, mandatory jail time, stop and frisk, and broken windows deterrent policies. Green agendas, the left hoped, would fundamentally transform America in putting an immediate stop to man-made, quote, climate change. Interesting how these things are always related. So lots of oil and gas leases were either canceled or their fees vastly increased. Pipelines were stopped. Gas and oil companies were warned that everything from lack of financing to new regulations would soon put them out of business. The golden age of wind and batteries was already upon us. Modern monetary theorists assured us that printing money would spread the wealth. Now, let me stop and explain modern monetary theorists. Modern monetary theory, MMT for short, holds that the government can put out as much fiat currency as its printing presses are capable of manufacturing. And there will be no adverse effects so long as the government honors that fiat currency in payment of government obligations. So we're at 30 trillion now. According to MMT, we could expand to 60 trillion worth of national debt. And so long as you could pay your taxes with that paper money, no problem. No one ever explained why other countries would sign on for this modern monetary theory. But that's how it works. Modern monetary theorists assured us that printing money would spread the wealth and devalue the cash of undeserving capitalists who had too much of it anyway. Printing more cash, they believed, would implant it in the hands of the needy who unfairly had too little. To the extent inflation followed, it would be a good thing, they hoped, a sign of newly empowered and robust consumer class denied equity. COVID was virtually over. We were assured by President Biden that Trump had killed over 350,000 Americans with his lax health policies. In contrast, Biden would soberly vaccinate us, claiming the vaccine's efficacy as his own. He predicted victory over the virus by the 4th of July. The Delta variant was still then just an obscure rumor from abroad. The border would be opened and stay open. No more walls. As citizens of the world, and this is big for the left, as citizens of the world, the left welcomed in 2 million immigrants who arrived illegally without audit or vaccinations during a pandemic. As the woke drove terrified old liberal Democrats into hiding, all the old wisdom about human nature vanished. Forget that criminals hurt the poor the most. Discard the quaint idea of Martin Luther King that our character, not our color, determines who we are. Ignore the passé idea that inflation eats away at the wages of the working class. We could always resume the quarantines, lockdowns, and shutdowns that made Amazon, Target, Walmart, and other conglomerates hundreds of billions in profits, while the mom and pop small businesses went broke. So what did the people conclude 10 months out from the woke getting their wishes? The polls reveal that the voters don't like open borders at all. They disapprove of illegal immigration as much as they support legal immigrants. They worry about crime and drugs. They don't want the unvetted and unvaccinated flowing across the borders. The people want cheaper, not pricier gas. They prefer American energy self-sufficiency. Why, with cup in hand, go begging to Saudi Arabia and Russia to pump more supposedly satanic oil? And that's exactly what he did. Hey, you guys over there in OPEC, can you produce more oil? We're running short. Prices are going up. The people like the police and hate crime. Even the rich among the woke are now scared, some of whom sowed the wind of decriminalization and now are themselves reaping the whirlwind of crime. Most voters care less about color, but are far more about character. They think a meritocracy, not quotas, and tribal chauvinism explains the exceptional American standard of life. They despise inflation as much as recession, and they fear they now may have both. Freedom-loving individuals don't like cancel culture, ostracism, iconoclasm, Trotskyism, Trotskyization, and commissars. They prefer free speech and treasure the Bill of Rights. So in just 10 months, the left got what it wanted. And the people are becoming not just sick of what was followed, but disgusted. They're terrified that the left is not just failing, but also wrecking the country and them along with it. That's exactly right. The ages have left us adages for people's growing anger at the hubristic and now unpopular left. We know the ancient warnings variously as what comes around goes around. You reap what you sow. Be careful what you wish for. And the law of unintended consequences. Words like nemesis and karma also come to mind. But of the collapse of the woke appeal, perhaps we say, it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of zealots. Great, huh? You know, we should put this on every lamppost and make it available to every one of the population, because this guy, this is Victor. He's always right on point, and he always lays it out so clearly and in such a readable fashion. Today is no exception. I would give him a blue star, but I don't pack enough gear to evaluate this guy favorably or unfavorably.
What was the title of that article again?
The woke got what they wanted, and then what? I got it out of PJ Media. All right. We go on next to Jussie versus the jury. Jussie Small, and we all know that what happened. We all know that 12 men, good and true, found Jussie guilty of every single charge. So what I'm going to read now came out before the verdict. Jussie Smollett's final act, how a hate crime hoax became a pitch for jury nullification. I didn't notice if Bonnie's tuned in today. Bonnie says, something about some guy, some Brocco or something like that. But anyhow, Bonnie's there. And yesterday, she mentioned jury nullification in the context of one of the jury trials we were talking about. So here we go, Bonnie. Jussie Smollett's final act, how a hate crime hoax became a pitch for jury nullification. In his testimony before a Chicago jury this week, actor Jussie Smollett talked about how he has had to carefully maintain his image as a black Cary Grant. The Empire, that's the name of the show, The Empire. Somehow I never saw that show. I missed it.
I have missed it also, intentionally.
The Empire star, however, seemed more like a modern version of Humphrey Bogart as Captain Queeg in the Caine Mutiny. You ever seen that movie? It's one of the great ones, Jose.
Oh wait, I have. That's the one that Mel Gibson remade years later.
I wouldn't know about that.
No, that's Mutant on the Bounty. I'm sorry.
If he had, I wouldn't watch it. Humphrey Bogart is Captain Queeg in the Caine Mutiny. It is a classic, and it's like the way films used to be made before we had all the special effects and nudity that now passes for movies. There is a conflict of morality that is illustrated very nicely aboard a ship. Captain Queeg was, in a few words, at least had a serious character defect, if not some sort of mental disability that made him unfit to command. And that's what the story is about. People realize that he's unfit to command, but what do you do when you're a junior naval officer on a ship and you know your captain is unfit to command? You can kind of see where this is going to go, where there's some room for really good writing, character, and plot development. Many have marveled at the audacity of Smollett, who literally is asking jurors to discard not just every piece of material evidence, videotape, and eyewitness testimony, but defy any semblance of logic in accepting his account of a racist attack by Trump supporters. That's because he's not trying to convince anyone he didn't stage the attack with the help of Nigerian brothers Abibola and Olubengo Osundero. He's trying to get the jury to vote for him despite his guilt. Jury nullification. It is called jury nullification, and this may be the most raw example of the practice in decades. Even if he can get a single holdout juror, he has a hung jury. After all, Smollett followed a similar strategy successfully in the media for months. He knew that facts are whatever people want them to be. Some of us expressed skepticism over Smollett's initial account. True Trump supporters coming upon him around 2 a.m. in Chicago on a freezing night in January 2019, and then allegedly beating him, putting the noose around his neck, pouring a chemical on him, and declaring perhaps for the first time in history that Chicago is MAGA country. Making this even more bizarre was a spontaneous attack shortly after Smollett was the target of a racist letter threatening to lynch him, a letter that prosecutors believe he wrote. None of that mattered, though, because Smollett knew his audience, Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, of course, we all know that Vice President Kamala Harris is a woman of color. That's how she got to be vice president, after all. Then a senator denounced what happened as an attempted modern-day lynching. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it was a homophobic attack and an affront to our humanity. In a fawning interview, ABC's Robin Roberts described Smollett as a bruised but not broken, and breathlessly concluded the segment with, "Beautiful. Thank you, Jussie." Got to take a short break here. We'll come back to the times and tribulations of Jussie Smollett right after the break.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The holidays are here and you know what that means. Time to gather with family and friends, dress up our homes, and explore Christmas season in paradise. Why not share these moments for a chance to win $100 in cash? Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram today to participate in the Guam Visitors Bureau #Instagram photo and video contest. A winner will be chosen every week, so share your best holiday moments now and win. Brought to you by GVB, making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Yeah. So these comments are so good, I think I have to read them again. Kamala Harris said, attempted modern-day lynching. I'll tie a string around these because we're going to come back to them in a minute. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, homophobic attack and an affront on our humanity. And Robin Roberts, bruised but not broken and beautiful. Thank you, Jussie. Yeah, now we'll see. And I don't want to go into the fact that he was found guilty. On Monday, we'll have a chance to talk about the riots, the looting, and all the rest of that. And then either the verbal hiding of people that made these silly statements or their chemistry, their political alchemy in turning what amounts to a pile of dung.
The gymnastics have already begun, I think just seconds after the verdict. And especially MSNBC has an op-ed on how this being found guilty, Jussie being found guilty, will hurt folks reporting hate crimes, but blaming the right.
Of course.
As if we were the ones perpetrated the hoax.
Exactly, yeah. So we should have just let him go so that people will report hate crimes, right?
It became an agenda bigger than Jussie Smollett himself, or however you pronounce it.
Smollett, yeah. A reference to the greater good, yeah. Which is the left is good at that, yeah. Okay, even when the evidence mounted that this was a hoax and some media figures lashed out at Smollett's doubters, ABC's The Talk host, Sarah Gilbert, was irate. I find so personally offensive that a gay black man is targeted and suddenly he becomes the victim of people's disbelief. The fact that he was not telling the truth has nothing to do with whether or not people should believe him because he's a gay black man. That's the message there. Smollett's attack was simply one of those facts too good to check. It made more sense to assume there are roaming bands of MAGA-hatted Trump supporters attacking black people on Chicago streets. That fits into the agenda much better than a gay black man making this up. In a courtroom, such willful blindness is supposed to yield to objective evidence. However, that is where the jury nullification comes in. Georgetown law professor and PMS-NBC legal analyst Paul Butler has been a long-standing advocate of black jurors engaging in jury nullification in some cases involving black defendants. Butler wrote in the Washington Post, confronting the racial crisis in criminal justice, jury nullification gives jurors a special power to send the message that Black Lives Matter. You send the message that Black Lives Matter when you are sitting on a jury and the evidence is overwhelming that the defendant is guilty, and you say, no, not guilty. That sends a message that Black Lives, yeah. Jury nullification is not an act of willful blindness. Rather, it is an act of willful disregard of the evidence. It occurs when jurors acquit regardless of the evidence of guilt. It is not that they don't see or understand the evidence. They simply choose the individual over the evidence. Lawyers usually cannot expressly ask jurors to disregard the evidence of a case in contradiction to a judge's instruction. You can't ask for a jury instruction. Jurors, you don't have to comply with the evidence. You can find this guy not guilty. No, you can't do that. But they can make the case for nullification in not so subtle ways. In Smollett's case, the defendant talked about his mistrust of the police and openly accused the prosecutor of misrepresenting facts to the jury when he took the stand. Counsel couldn't do this. He could when he took the stand. In front of the jury, he declared, quote, "I'm a black man in America and I do not trust the police." Smollett was curt on cross-examination, insisting that the two Nigerian brothers, one of whom he said was once his lover, nice, the Chicago police, the prosecutors, and others all sought to frame him. Smollett even chastised prosecutor Dan Webb for reading from Smollett's Instagram messages, which included the N-word. So his own Instagram messages used the dreaded, condemned
He
N-word.
was asking him, could you please stop using that word?
Yeah.
I'm quoting you.
Could you please quit repeating what I put in my own messages? Smollett told Webb to spell or abbreviate the word so as not to offend every African American in this room. There have been historical uses of jury nullification to resist government abuse, including racist prosecutions. One of the first instances was the acquittal in 1735 of publisher Peter Zenger, which we all studied in high school, I think, who printed seditious libels against abusive colonial governor William Cosby. However, jury nullification can have a darker side when jurors refuse to convict people because they agree with a crime, including possible hate crimes. That was the argument once made implicitly to some white jurors in the early to mid-20th century to disregard crimes committed against African Americans, even murder. Everybody go see To Kill a Mockingbird the next time it's on. Or Intruder in the Dust. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
No privilege. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The federal appeals court in Washington, D.C., ruling that former President Trump provided no basis for them to override President Biden's judgment and allow the National Archives to provide White House records to the House committee investigating what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Trump had claimed executive privilege over those documents, but President Biden waived it. The House committee wants to see presidential diaries, visitor logs, and drafts of speeches, among other things. That decision could be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. House Democrats are preparing to bring legal charges against the president's former chief of staff next week.
House members were advised to prepare for a Tuesday vote after the Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot votes on a contempt report. Meadows provided documents to the panel before ending his cooperation this week. The House vote would refer a criminal contempt citation to the U.S. Attorney's Office. A federal grand jury indicted former White House aide Steve Bannon on contempt charges last month. The trial is scheduled to begin in July.
Fox's Jared Halpern at the Capitol. The Senate has passed a fast-track plan for raising the debt limit. 14 Republicans and all 50 Senate Democrats approving a one-time expedited process for the Senate to pass a debt ceiling increase by a simple majority vote. That will likely avert another last-minute rush to avoid a federal default next week. Actor Jussie Smollett guilty of filing false police reports in Chicago for claiming he'd been the victim of a racist and homophobic hate crime attack almost 3 years ago.
And then compounded his crimes by lying to the jury during the course of this trial and insulting their intelligence.
Special Prosecutor Dan Webb, but Smollett's attorney Nene Uche says,
I don't for 1 second believe that justice was done today, and that's my opinion.
He says they will appeal the verdict. Smollett free on bond. America is listening to Fox News.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The age limit for coronavirus booster shots has been lowered by federal health authorities.
The Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have given emergency use authorization for 16 and 17-year-olds to get a third dose of the vaccine from Pfizer. The feds say that booster should be given 6 months after their last dose. Nearly 5 million teens in that age range have gotten the initial 2 shots of vaccine. As for 12 to 15-year-olds, it's not clear yet when they may be eligible for boosters. For now, the Pfizer vaccine's the only option for anyone under the age of 18. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Dozens of suspected Central American migrants have been killed in a horrific truck crash in southern Mexico. A large truck carrying about 200 migrants tipped over Thursday and slammed into a bridge abutment. There are 53 people known dead. Dozens more are reported injured. Many of the victims are believed to be from Honduras. The United Nations humanitarian chief is warning that Afghanistan's economic collapse is happening before our eyes, and he's urging the international community to take action to stop the free fall before it leads to more deaths. Martin Griffiths saying we're seeing the economic collapse in Afghanistan that is beyond exponential. A Super Bowl champion is dead. Former Broncos wide receiver Demaryius Thomas found dead in his home in suburban Atlanta. Police say from a medical condition. Thomas was a 5-time Pro Bowler, just retired in June. He was 33. And there's been a death in the music world. Ralph Tavares, the eldest of the 5 brothers in the Grammy-winning R&B singing group that bore the family's name, has died at his home in Massachusetts. According to his manager, Ralph Tavares was 79. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The holidays are here, and you know what that means. Time to gather with family and friends, dress up our homes, and explore Christmas season in paradise. Why not share these moments for a chance to win $100 in cash? Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram today to participate in the Guam Visitors Bureau #Instagram photo and video contest. A winner will be chosen every week, so share your best holiday moments now and win. Brought to you by GVB, making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources,
sports talk, and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh has done it again, serving up yet another new and improved sub, the Cali Fresh Steak, loaded with tender, flavorful marinated steak on top of thick-cut hickory smoked bacon, smashed avocado, and fresh mozzarella. The Cali Fresh Steak is protein-packed to leave you feeling full and satisfied. Cali Fresh Steak is made on our freshly baked hearty multigrain bread layered with fresh veggies of your choice. Subway, eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. Zero down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
So here we are back on Tall Tales, and second half, after that big halftime show, I was just looking at Facebook here, just one came in here. Colin Clark asked Lisa Aguirre, how do you say looser in Chamorro? So my feeble attempt at it would be mascalilo, but I could be right, I'm probably wrong. Sa kada I finu tomorrow kada dialo appling I tomorrow. So dispensa. Okay, so we're still talking about jury trials here. Jussie Smollett, you remember yesterday I had a piece from a lady named Abdullah, Melina Abdullah, and she said, we can never believe the police. She was sticking up for Jussie. I wonder what rap she'll have. I suspect that acquiescing in the jury verdict won't be part of her rap. So, you know, we've had some interesting jury trials. We've had Kyle Rittenhouse, where the left said that he should have been convicted because he's a racist. After all, bringing an assault rifle to a peaceful demonstration, crossing state lines to bring an assault weapon to a peaceful demonstration in support of Black Lives Matter should be punishable by at least a long term in prison. And then we had the case of Arbery down in Georgia, where 3 white guys killed a black guy, and they were all found guilty. But that didn't work very well either, because it's probably a one-off. It's not the norm down in that part of the country, and we can't depend on it. But when you get down to it, the jury is an extremely important part of our justice system. You know, we have judges, we have the priests of the law who wear black robes, and I get down on our judiciary from time to time, especially the United States Supreme Court. But the jury is not the elite. The jury is your friends and neighbors, a jury of your peers. And it's an extremely important part of our judicial system. I've got an article here from a publication called Law and Liberty. The constitutional requirement of a jury in criminal cases represents an essential protection of our liberty, an expression of democracy, and a commitment to deciding cases based on empirical evidence. It is not only a fundamental feature of America, but a celebration of the values of the Enlightenment that trusts in evidence and the collective wisdom of people disciplined by rules to sift through that evidence. At a time when the values of both our founding and the Enlightenment are under attack, it should not be surprising that even the highest officials in our nation do not give the jury its proper respect, and that our culture, particularly our media culture, makes it harder for the jury to flourish. The reaction of leaders to Kyle Rittenhouse verdict demonstrates how beleaguered the jury system is. For instance, after initially defending the verdict, the president said, quote, he was angered by it. Governor J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, denounced the verdict, calling it a tragedy that the court did not recognize that shooting unarmed civilians is wrong and that we must do better than this. Unarmed civilians.
They always just leave out the most important details.
Yeah. Cross state lines with an assault rifle to kill unarmed civilians at a mostly peaceful demonstration. Yeah.
That must have been a different case.
Yeah. The only virtue of these irresponsible comments by politicians who, unlike the members of the jury, had not heard the evidence in the case is to remind us that our fathers created the jury system in large part to prevent powerful leaders from putting people in jail to satisfy their own political imperatives. The Sixth Amendment's right to a criminal jury reflected the experience of those who wrote it. The revolutionary generation keenly recalled the jury had restrained the injustice of the Crown's centralized authority, most notably when a jury had acquitted Peter Zenger for seditious libel brought by the administration of the governor of New York. The jury thus was originally celebrated as a popular institution that restrained undemocratic authority at the time the rule of colonial governors appointed by the Crown. Colonial governors. Wow. But the framers who ensured that the law would be made and enforced through the democratic mechanisms retained an important role for the jury in the Republic as an additional protection for liberty and a mediating institution between the individual and the state. In that new democratic context, the jury is distinguished from the legislature and the executive not so much by its popular nature, but by features that allow the jury better to approximate spontaneous order of civic society than more top-down institutions of democracy. Institutions that, as the comments of our current leaders demonstrate, are liable to demagoguery and pandering. Yeah, the two strong suits of the left, demagoguery and pandering. First, the jury is sensitive to the nuances of local values because it's drawn from the local community. Second, while the jury is like democracy, an institution directly dependent on the people, it does not typically face the process defects such as leverage of special interest and the rational apathy of students that beset centralized mass democracy. In contrast to more centralized democratic institutions, the jury focuses attentions of a set of citizens on specific purposes, and so on. This is a really good article here. I'll skip over to the media and the jury. For the jury to be respected, the media has to lay the groundwork for that respect by providing unbiased reporting before the trial. But as others have noted, the mainstream media tended to leave out important facts about the Rittenhouse case. This failure to provide context led to surprise at the verdict in some quarters, a surprise that motivated, even if it does not justify, office holders' attacks on the verdicts. For instance, the events in Kenosha, the background to the Rittenhouse trial, were portrayed as mostly peaceful demonstrations rather than riots wreaking widespread destruction. Rittenhouse was deemed an interloper, someone who had no connections to Kenosha, despite the fact that his father lived there and he worked there as a lifeguard. The salient fact that he had been chased and his life threatened was also left out of many narratives. And it was implied that the incident was racial, even though those whom he shot were white. As a candidate for president, Biden shockingly encouraged this perspective. labeling him with any apparent evidence, without any apparent evidence, a white supremacist. These false, misleading narratives, of course, underscore the importance of the jury trial. Rittenhouse had defense lawyers to present the actual facts to the jury, and it was that presentation that saved him from prison. But sadly, the prevalence of a false pretrial narrative also shows that continuing public acceptance of the institution of the jury may depend on a beneficial political climate that is itself under threat. One part of that culture is the presence of a media that tries its best to report the relevant facts even before trial, even when those facts do not fit into an overarching narrative, like the need to fight racial injustice. Another is a political climate of mutual respect rather than polarization that discourages politicians from trying to distort jury verdicts to create a political payoff, which we're going to see a lot of on Monday. You can bet. I'll give you odds on that one. Okay. I've got somebody on the line here.
Just real quick, Bob, there's one more case that didn't get a lot of press.
Sure.
That the verdict was handed down, I think, almost the exact same time as the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. And it was a jury verdict, and it was of Andrew Coffey down in Florida, who was a convicted felon, and yet was cleared of all charges of murder because of self-defense. And a jury acquitted him.
And murder of a cop.
Murder of a cop, yep.
Yeah. As I recall that case, what was it? Coffey and his girlfriend were asleep.
The cops were there on a warrant for his father.
Yeah, and Coffey and his girlfriend were asleep. He thought someone was breaking into his house. He woke up and shot a cop because he thought he was someone about to do him harm. And went before a jury, and the jury found that he exercised his right of self-defense and found him not guilty. I suspect the cop was probably white, the shooter was black, right?
And thus did not fit the narrative.
Yeah, so that's why we haven't heard anything about it at all. It doesn't really count. Yeah. If the shooter is white and the victims are and the shootees are white, you can make something out of it if the demonstration is a peaceful demonstration for justice. Yeah. Okay, I've got Repeat on the line. He wants to talk about trials in general. He's been through a few of them, that's for sure. So go for it, Pete.
Hey, Uncle Bob. One of the other tools, very powerful tools that defense counsel has is because of a case called Kentucky versus Batson.
Yeah, Batson. I think it's Batson. Yeah, I mentioned that on the show the other day, and I didn't understand how we had 11 white jurors and one black one in that Arbery case. But anyhow, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, and, for those that don't understand or don't know what that is, it's if the defense feels like prosecution are practicing their peremptory challenges, which is removing jurors and they don't have to state a reason for it, right? And it seems to be targeting a certain demographic or racial group or even gender, then they can call a mistrial, and then they'll have to do it all over again. But one of the things that I wanted to share is a trial that I experienced where I was the only person of color in the whole trial. The judge, all the jurors, all the witnesses, the defendant, the prosecutor. I'm sorry, I was the prosecutor. The defense counsel, they were all Caucasian. And so I thought, wow. And this was when I was mobilized to active duty, and I was in Salt Lake City. So, when in Salt Lake City, there isn't much of a diverse jury pool, right? So, anyways, be that as it may, I thought, wow, what are the chances of me securing convictions on this high-ranking individual, right? He had committed certain frauds and stuff regarding government monies and some of his records. He falsified some of his records. Anyways, I laid out the case, and they found him guilty on all charges. So I was like, okay, that restores my faith. There could have been an issue where they look at me and say, hey, who's this brown guy coming over here and thinking he knows his stuff. But they were all hometown boys, and they listened to the evidence and they deliberated, and they ended up convicting him on all counts.
It's an interesting story, but I prefer a different explanation. It was the brilliance of counsel that brought home the victory, Pete.
No, I think it's really just that they set aside any biases if there were any, and just listen to the facts.
False modesty is the prerogative of the host only, Pete.
Right, okay, Uncle Bob, but really it was just it's an anomaly, but like I said, all the witnesses, all the parties involved, the defense counsel and the judge and the legal advisor, because in the court-martial, you also have to have a separate legal advisor. All of them, blonde hair, blue eyes, and I still prevailed, and I was just so, my faith was restored.
Well,
put it that way.
I have the suspicion that in most of the United States Army, we judge people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin.
Yes, I agree.
Well, thanks a lot for sharing, Pete. It's good to talk to somebody who's really been in the trenches on various kinds of trials, so thanks for calling.
Yes, and have a great weekend. Be sorry to miss you guys over the weekend, but I'll be looking forward for you guys again on Monday.
We'll see you then, Pete. Okay, Pete and repeat. So next on the card is Tall Tales versus Separatists. This may be the most important part of the card, maybe not. But today, in Pacific Daily News, the hard copy, if you picked one up, you would have found a supplement, a 16-page supplement that looks like this. And it says, Guam, a territory like no other. And you might have thought it had something to do with resorts or tourism or something like that, but it's not. It's a product of the Separatist Commission that bills itself, that wants you to think that it's involved in decolonization. So the first 3 words of the text in this, let me make sure it's 16 pages here. Oh, no, it's not 16, it's 20 pages. The first 3 words of this publication here, and if you don't have it, I would strongly suggest that you go get it, because it's going to be the textbook for our show for quite a few days. And you'll want to enlighten yourself as to where the separatists are going with this. So the first 3 words set the tone for the whole paper. It says, resolving Guam's political status is important work. This paper is not about resolving Guam's political status. It's about something else. And I will tell you what it's about by reading the title of Chapter 21 of Title I of the Guam Code Annotated that creates this commission. The commission that I refer to as a papier-mâché commission. Papier-mâché because although there are 11 ex officio members on that commission, the commission apparently has no role at all other than to serve as window dressing for Melvin Wanpat, who is the executive director of the commission, who will take it upon himself to issue press releases taking on a citizen who had the temerity of in a public forum speaking separatism wrong speak. So here is the title of Chapter 21, Commission on Decolonization. Oh, that sounds right, a Commission on Decolonization, if that's what we're going to do. But let me read the whole thing. Commission on Decolonization for the implementation and exercise of Chamorro self-determination. Implementation and exercise of Chamorro self-determination. And this 20-page literary masterpiece is paid for by the Commission on Decolonization. Now, they don't put the whole title in there. Commission on Decolonization, and funded through the U.S. Department of Interior, Office of Insular Affairs, Technical Assistance Program Grant Federal Award for the purpose of decolonization education. We'll come back to the idea of education here before we're done with this whole thing. So the first three words, the first 3 or 4 words, resolving Guam's political, it's not about resolving Guam's political status. It's about the implementation and exercise of Chamorro self-determination. And the very first paragraph of Chapter 21, paragraph 2101, reads as follows. Legislature finds that the native inhabitants of Guam, since its recorded history, have been subjected to incessant control by external colonial powers. The legislature further finds that upon execution of the bilateral treaty between the two sovereign nations, Spain and the United States, the transfer of colonial control over the lands and people of Guam was effectuated. The United States, as the succeeding colonial power over the lands and people of Guam, now remember this, acceded to and recognized in the 1898 Treaty of Paris that the political rights of the native inhabitants of Guam shall be protected and their collective right to political self-determination is inalienable. Now, this is Guam law. I didn't go back to find out who drafted this, but I suspect it's all part of the separatist conglomeration trying to move Guam away from the United States. But once again, what the statute says is that in the Treaty of Paris, the political rights of the native inhabitants of Guam shall be protected and their collective rights to political self-determination is inalienable. Now, this is just a simple reading exercise. I read the statute. Now, being a suspicious son of a gun, the next thing I do is I read the Treaty of Paris. So I go to Article 9 of the Treaty of Paris, and it starts out talking about Spanish subjects, natives of the peninsula, etc., the territory, etc. And then we get down to the last sentence of the paragraph, of the section, we find this. The civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress. That's all it says. Now compare that to what the statute says. The Treaty of Paris, that the political rights of the native inhabitants shall be protected and their collective right to political self-determination is inalienable. It's wrong. Maybe I should use the L word. I don't know if you can accuse the scrivener of a statute of lying, but, when you start out with something like this, it just casts a pall over every other part of it. So if this is one of the foundations here of the separatist movement, the treaty, we're just relying on our rights under the Treaty of Paris. Congress is supposed to protect our collective rights to political self-determination. The civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by Congress. Doesn't say how they should be determined, when they would be determined, etc. So what happened was, after that, the You know, international law has a role in this. Who's in charge during the war, who's in charge after the war, before the peace treaty, etc. But after the peace treaty, certainly Congress had the ability to deal with the newly acquired insular territories. In the case of Guam, the president, as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, said, Navy, you're in charge. And we started 52 years of martial law, with a naval officer being the plenipotentiary of Guam. No self-government, complete, almost complete, well, martial law, government by the military. And it was only in 1950 that Guam became a territory because of the enactment of the Organic Act. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there's a deliberate attempt to mislead here. The Treaty of Paris, political rights of the native inhabitants shall be protected, and their collective right to political self-determination is inalienable. You won't find that in anything that is the United States. Okay, so this kind of sets the tone, but there's something else here that I want to use to set the tone for this entire 20-page publication. Now, I've studied the whole thing, and I'm going to have to chop it up in little pieces. I can't do it all in one program, but I want to, once again, talk in terms of setting the tone. So let's head for Wrigley Field, and when we come back, we'll set the tone.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
As we celebrate this holiday season, we reflect on the hardships of the past 2 years and remain grateful for the family and friends who share our journey and lighten our burdens. The team at Security Title is proud of the work we do to support ourselves and our families, to serve and care for our customers, and to give back to our community. May this season of joy and the new year bring happiness, good health, and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR at 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
Okay, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. I've been there a few times myself. Sat in the left field grandstand. Never had to, well, actually once I sat in the center field bleachers, which is kind of cool because the Cubs were playing the Phillies. And I got probably within about 10 feet of Richie Ashburn, one of the best center fielders back in the day, when he chased a fly ball all the way to the center field wall in Wrigley. Okay, so setting the tone here for this 20-page work of literary legerdemain. You know, when you are promoting something, advocating something, trying to sell something, oftentimes you want to identify that whatever it is that you're pushing with a person, perhaps a picture of the person's name, a formal endorsement, something like that. You know, we see the image of Abraham Lincoln all over, George Washington, etc. The name of Lincoln Savings and Loan, etc. And if Abraham Lincoln walked down the street, everybody would recognize him because his picture has been broadcast so far. So this is just kind of a fundamental, I don't know if I would call it convention of advertising or public relations, but you try to identify with a person. And that's exactly what this publication has done. When you get your copy, turn to page 10, and you'll find on the right-hand side, you'll find a little square box that says perspective. And then it says Commonwealth still a colonial status. Chamorro-only self-determination vote is the only way to resolve the issue of a captive Guam. This is what it looks like if you haven't seen it. And you'll notice there's a picture, if you could watch it on Facebook, and it's a picture of, and it's an article that ran in one of the papers, and the byline is Hope Alvarez Cristobal. So, you know, when you think in terms of the separatist movement, independence, Chamorro self-determination, I guess the message is remember Hope Cristobal. So just to help us remember Hope Cristobal, we have a video that puts that shows us Hope Cristobal kind of in full flower, which I'm going to ask Jose to play for you on Facebook. And if not, you can listen to it on.
Nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization is the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are. Get off my island.
So you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest or what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. That's cool, but you should not be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to yell.
I'm an indigenous Chamorro. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole. You need to leave.
You need to go.
Please.
You need to get out of here.
Please, pause this.
Get out of here.
Please, this is not
When I get a chance, come talk.
Thank you, Pastor. Please. No, you can't let
What happened, man?
Well, he confronted me.
What did he
He's
say?
telling me I shouldn't be here.
Why?
I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization.
We are proud of you, Auntie. He's safe.
So once again, here's the face of decolonization. You just saw it on the screen. And that solves the riddle. Now I know. When I read about the Treaty of Paris, etc., I wondered who was responsible. Hope Cristobal's taking credit for it. So it kind of all makes sense, doesn't it?
All because he went up to her and said, red rice is orange.
Yeah. By the way,
what color is your shirt?
is it orange or is it red?
Good question.
Yeah. So that really kind of sets Hope Cristobal, highlighting Hope Cristobal and her views on colonial status. When you see the real Hope Cristobal in action here and hear her words, that the gentleman she was confronted was the worst kind of person. He was a white person. He's a colonialist. He's a murderer. As though those terms aren't synonyms one for the other. You could just mention one, and that covers all three of them, right? So if you haven't seen it, you really need to get a hold of it. So I'm going to spend a few days on this, taking it apart one piece at a time. I'm going to just wind up with a couple of thoughts. I'm going to go to something dealing with a gentleman named Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse, Frankfurt School, critical theory, big name in the 60s. In the 60s, the smart guys at Harvard and Yale would chant Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. And here's what one of Marcuse's theories. He said that liberating tolerance would mean intolerance against movements from the right and toleration of movements from the left. Surely no government can be expected to foster its own subversion, but in a democracy, such a right is vested in the people, in the majority of the people. That is, the right to subvert our own government. That's what Herbert Marcuse taught. And that doesn't come out and bite you in the eyeballs if you read this 20-page insert. But when you stop and once you've been through the whole thing and you stop and think about it a little bit, there is really only one choice. That's independence. And I've explained that before, that there are two throwaway choices and one real choice, independence, which is sugar-coated as tomorrow's self-determination. But there is nothing in the 20 pages or anything else that Juan Pat's commission has turned out that would talk about the other side. Is there a downside to decolonization? Are there any disadvantages in decolonization? Or is the message for decolonization so strong that we need to engage in liberating tolerance, just like Herbert Marcuse, intolerance of anything but the decolonization movement? I think that's where we are, because if you study it and you work with all the parts and put it together, you will come to the conclusion that this is only advocating for an independent Guam. Now, it's well done, and it's well camouflaged, and it's well sugar-coated, but the person who studies it and follows the tracks will conclude that this is about convincing you and everybody else that the decolonization means independence. And now I'll get into that in more detail next week. I'll take it piece by piece, but you want to make sure you get a copy of this. Okay, next on the card is LG versus T.
Would that be the governor versus the lieutenant governor?
Well, close, but no cigar, Jose. And it's not LG, the TV manufacturer, either.
Oh,
yeah.
Versus Toshiba.
Yeah. LG is the first two letters of LGDBQRS, wherever it goes now. BT.
And sometimes Y.
And sometimes Y.
Why all these acronyms?
And sometimes an E, but the E is always silent. And so the LG stands for lesbian, and the L stands for lesbian, G stands for gay, and the T stands for transgender. So this is LG versus T. And this is an article that ran in The Federalist, something of a conservative rag, by a guy named, well, it's by a person named Joshua Slocum. We can never be sure anymore. And the title is, "It's Time for Gays and Lesbians to Stand Up and Reject the Perverts Abusing Our Cause." Well, the gay and lesbian community was proudly welcoming anyone who claimed to be part of our cause. Predators and perverts infiltrated our ranks. School board meetings around the country are heating up as parents protest pornographic books appearing in public school libraries. One controversial graphic novel in particular, Gender Queer, is available in many libraries for teens to read. It depicts a girl who fantasizes about having a penis so she can have gay sex. The book's drawing depicts a girl wearing a strap-on sex toy while another girl fellates the device.
It's a children's book.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, it's the school board meetings are, you know, these come up in school board meetings, but of course anyone who protests is going to wind up on the FBI's no-fly list and
terrorists
and Merrick Garland's I don't like him list, etc. A Vermont mother contacted me when she discovered Gender Queer in the Essex High School library, as I host a weekly video podcast called Disaffected, which discusses issues like this one. After filing a police report on the grounds of disseminating obscene material to minors, the Essex police chief responded on November 1. Quote, "I wanted to let you know that I have an answer from the state attorney," probably the state's attorney, probably the district attorney, "and also thank you for dropping off the book. I shared your email and attachment with their office Friday. The state's attorney has informed me that they will not prosecute on this matter. They believe that it would be difficult to satisfy the definition of harmful to minors as that is defined by the statute. The material has to appeal to the prurient, shameful, or morbid interest of minors, be patently offensive to prevailing standards of adult community as a whole, and lack serious literary artistic value. This is a high standard and would be difficult to meet. Therefore, the police department will not investigate nor become involved further in this." That apparently is that. The sacred caste of trans people in any effort to support their cause can do no wrong. It's not pornography. It's, quote, "stunning and brave." The indulgence has brought society to a place where people are fired and shunned for not referring to men as women. Worse, it has normalized the symptoms of mental illness that frequently occur in children who have been sexually, physically, or emotionally abused. Trans activism has also destroyed the gay community. What I call original recipe homosexuals like me are low on the totem pole beneath men and women claiming to be the opposite sex. Gay men are hooded, as it were hounded, by trans ideologues who we won't date if we won't date the slight and obviously female trans men. Lesbian bars have also disappeared. Lesbians can't say no to men in dresses without being called bigots at best and threatened with rape or murder at worst. If you paid attention to the trans wars on social media, You can find countless examples of lesbians being called, quote, trans exclusionary or bigots for refusing to sleep with men. They're not men, according to the trans activists. They're trans women with female penises. This screenshot is typical. I can't show you the screenshot. Translation: this user is a male who calls himself a woman and is angry at a lesbian who declined to date. TERF, T-E-R-F, is the term of abuse to hurl at women who don't believe that when a man says, quote, I'm a woman, that makes him a woman. Trans activists often characterize such women and sane people generally as abusive bigots. Trans activist abuse against women has become so prevalent, even the activist sympathetic BBC covered the topic last month. Quote, I have had someone saying they would rather kill me than Hitler, one woman told the BBC. They said they would strangle me with a belt if they were in a room with me and Hitler. That was so bizarrely violent just because I won't have sex with trans women. But worst of all is how the trans juggernaut has taken aim at children. In 2021, we're watching mentally unstable parents tell their children they are born in the wrong body and need to have their puberty chemically blocked. Many of these abused kids will go on to take cross-sex hormones that will leave them unable to have children. This slow poison, we call it gender-affirming care, ages the body and causes bones and organs to degrade and break down long before old age. There's a name for this, Munchausen's system by proxy. We used to recognize it when we saw a parent intentionally sickening an otherwise healthy child in order to bask in the attention that comes to martyr mothers. But utter the word trans and otherwise sane people look at this grotesquerie, I gotta pull up here a little bit, and call it beautiful. Meanwhile, states across the country are pretending humans can change sex. Legislatures are claiming to, quote, protect trans kids by allowing boys to compete on girls' sports teams. Yes, these boys in dresses get to use the girls' locker room too. If you object, you're a transphobe. It's past time to call a halt to this delusion. No child is born in the wrong body. No child needs care that is actually poisoning and mutilation. Gay men and lesbian my age have a turn for this. Trancing away the gay. Multiple studies have documented that the vast majority of kids diagnosed with gender dysphoria will outgrow it at puberty. Most, although not all, will become homosexual adults. Okay, I got to go to Churchill Downs here. And let's see who have I got waiting in the green room. Another Joe. I hope I can get you on before the end of the show, Another Joe.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to nectac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch for Tall Tales. We're almost to the finish line for another week. Back to this article. Gay men and lesbians must stand up and say enough is enough. While we congratulated ourselves on how big-hearted we were to anyone who claimed to be part of our community, predators and perverts infiltrated our ranks. We were fighting for the right to hold a job and build a life with a partner of our choosing. Modern trans activists are working the legislative system to tear down sex-based privacy. They want to force us all to say black is white on the pain of firing or cancellation. They are using children to give their very adult psychological problems a plausible and natural backstory. We fought for decades to achieve the same basic legal rights enjoyed by heterosexuals, not special privileges, the same rights. The trans train is threatening to derail that, and it's threatening the health and well-being of our future, our children. This is written by Joshua Slocum, who says he's gay. So, very well put, and boy, he doesn't pull any punches, does he? But, you know, this relates back to two columns that I read earlier. One is Victor Davis Hanson. This is what you guys and gals wanted. Okay, now you got it. How do you like it? Because you kind of, you know, the gays and the lesbians, you kind of brought this on yourself. You LGBT folks brought this on yourself. Now you're there. Do you like it? And then Father Fran, the two sides. Can we stop fighting with each other? Not as long as one side embraces this. No, we'll never stop fighting. Okay, I'm at the end of the show. Let me get to, if I got time to let Real Joe say goodbye. Okay, Real Joe Cruz, another Joe. Go for it.
I know I missed you guys for 2 days, man.
Me too.
Real quick, actually, the issue I called out was what was it? I'm going to call it anti-white, like Bob.
Okay.
Basically, unfortunately, at this juncture, the whites have become the easy target, for low-hanging fruit, so to speak, for people who basically want to point a finger and blame and play whack-a-mole. So I suggest that they're pushing it a little too far because, like the old saying, what happens when they're finished picking on whites? Who are they going to pick next? You know, like right now you got this acronym. Right now, the trans are perceiving it being picked on by gays and lesbians. So, you know, how do you be objective? You have to be objective, be objective. So you have to, we used to have don't ask, don't tell. They didn't want that, like you said, so this is what we have to do now. But yeah, let's listen to everyone. Now, if former Senator Cristobal doesn't want to listen to everyone, how does she expect we're going to be objective? Right now, it's just get white guy, anti-white guy. That's not, you know, who's next? You know, are you Chamorro enough? And then who's gonna oversee that committee? The Chamorro enough committee. Thanks for your time, I appreciate it.
Good talking to you, another Joe. Yeah. I guess we're at the end of the rainbow, Jose. Good timing, another Joe. Okay, we'll see you Monday, 70 hours from now. We'll somehow struggle through. See you then. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
It was acting. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. That's the jury's decision of the trial of actor Jussie Smollett, who claimed he'd been the victim of a hate crime.
The jury found Smollett guilty of 5 of the 6 counts he faced. The guilty verdicts were all on disorderly conduct for lying to investigators. Special Prosecutor Dan Webb said that appeared to be a pattern Smollett continued even as he defended himself at trial.
Defendants have a right to argue that their case has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But defendants do not have the right to go in front of a jury and lie under oath.
Smollett's defense attorney says the case was prejudged and will be won on appeal. For now, a sentencing date will be set in January.
Fox's Gernal Scott. President Biden among those paying tribute to the late Senator Bob Dole as he lay in state Thursday under the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol.
America has lost one of our greatest patriots. We may follow his wisdom, I hope, and his timeless truth.
Senate Majority Leader Schumer said Dole redefined what service to country meant. The former Kansas senator died Sunday at the age of 98. Bob Dole's funeral is today at the National Cathedral in Washington. Wounded while serving in World War II, Senator Dole will be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. With the help of 14 Republicans, the Senate has passed a procedural measure that will make it possible for a one-time simple majority vote to raise the debt ceiling next week to prevent a federal default on Wednesday. Headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, former President Trump's claim of executive privilege over White House documents sought by the House January 6th committee. A federal appeals court panel has rejected Mr. Trump's claims of executive privilege. A day after a mixed day on Wall Street Thursday that saw NASDAQ lose 296 points. Asian stock markets closing Friday lower. Early morning Dow futures are nearly flat. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, this is Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Every Tuesday, you'll hear what's on my mind. Plus, every Thursday, there's a special bonus episode where we answer the questions that are on your mind. Make sure to spend your Tuesdays and Thursdays with Trey. Subscribe now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Hope to see you.
America's listening to Fox News. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Jessica Tarlov.
I'm Chris Wallace, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
More legal trouble and new charges against a former prominent South Carolina attorney suspected in the murders of his wife and son.
A lawsuit filed against attorney Alex Murdaugh by the sons of his former housekeeper says he used $2 million from a settlement for her estate to pay off a hitman accused of shooting Murdaugh in a botched assisted suicide scheme. But that's not all. Murdaugh's facing new indictments on 7 more alleged schemes where the attorney's accused of telling clients their settlements were smaller than expected, and he took the extra money and put it into a fake account. Murdaugh now faces nearly 50 counts like money laundering and breach of trust. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Police in San Francisco say DNA has helped them solve a cold case murder. A man already in jail for something else now charged with drowning a waitress in 1996 in the basement of the restaurant where she worked. A Super Bowl NFL champion receiver has died.
Fox TV affiliate WAGA, the first to report that Demaryius Thomas has passed away. Thomas was a standout at Georgia Tech, considered a successor at wide receiver to the great Calvin Johnson. DT to fans went on to be selected in the first round of the 2010 NFL Draft by the Denver Broncos after a first-team All-ACC year for the Yellow Jackets in 2009. He'd go on to 5 Pro Bowl appearances during his nearly 9 seasons with the Broncos, a Super Bowl champion with Denver as they defeated the Carolina Panthers in Super Bowl 50. Thomas went on to brief stints with the Houston Texans, New England Patriots, and New York Jets, formally announcing his retirement from the NFL back in June of this year. Demaryius Thomas was 33 years old. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
The top U.S. commander for the Middle East says the U.S. will keep its current level of 2,500 troops in Iraq for the foreseeable future. Despite their shift to a non-combat role, they'll still provide air support and other military support for Iraq's continuing fight against the Islamic State. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Afre, my name is Kiona Rivera, student at the University of Guam and recent recipient of the G is for Giving Scholarship. This holiday season, I'm encouraging our island community to support the G is for Giving campaign. Your generous contribution not only support programs at the university, but also helps students like me reach our academic goals. For more information on how you can help shape the future leaders of our island, call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 671-735-2957 or visit their website at give.uog.edu.
You might be a tailgater.
If your day is not complete until Tall Tales starts at 4 p.m., you might be a tailgater. If every time you laugh, you now sound like the real Joe, you might be a tailgater. If you don't like Fridays because Tall Tales is not on during the weekend, you might be a tailgater.
Tune in to Tall Tales with me, Bob Klitzkie, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m., only on 93.3 FM. And you, too, can become a tailgater.
Sometimes if you don't come to the realization that it is good for yourself, for your family, and for the communal good, then mandates or requirements become necessary.
Violent crime and property crime, for example, is higher in Texas than it is in California. I don't see that on Fox News.
As Matt said, we're in a situation where we've known that our infrastructure had problems for a long, long time.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
Yeah, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America. This is a special edition of the Sean Hannity Show. America trapped behind enemy lines. Day number 117. Coming up next, our final news roundup and information overload hour.
All right, News Roundup, Information Overload Hour, 800-941-SEAN, our number. You want to be a part of the program. Now, we've discussed, and by the way, they're about to light the Christmas tree, the new Christmas tree at the Fox News Channel. I think it's going to be bigger, they call it Fox Square, and it's along 6th Avenue in New York City and 48th Street. If you live in the New York area, you want to go and stop by and see it. They're making a big deal about it. I will not be there, but if, for people that want to, obviously I can't be here at the same time. One of the things that has been pretty amazing, if you go back to the ratings of Johnny Carson, they were massive. I mean massive. 20 shares, 15 shares. I mean, even over the years, you go back to the days of Letterman versus Leno. I mean, Leno was easily 4, 5, 6 share in the ratings. And Letterman, when he became political, his ratings started to decline. And Leno, he didn't care who he was making fun of. He was just being funny. And that's what's now missing from late night comics. Colbert's show was pretty much dead, gone, and buried, and then Donald Trump came on the scene, and he built a little audience of I hate Donald Trump sycophants, never Trumpers, and he's not stopped the never-ending left-wing, radical, so-called humor that's not funny anymore. And people see it. People like him and Kimmel and Fallon, they barely can reach 2 million viewers a night because that's not what people want from a comedian. And I think the comedian that steps forward and one day is just trying to make you laugh before you go to sleep and non-political will be the one that breaks through. Now, it's interesting on the Fox News Channel because Greg Gutfeld's late night show, which has a lot of humor in it. He's a very funny guy. He's a friend of the show. Greg Gutfeld's show is now competing with these network shows, and he's right on their ass. And it's in large part because he's the only one that has a different political viewpoint. Anyway, and for him, anything that's funny is fair game. So Colbert last night, and Joe Concha had a really interesting tweet over this. He said, overpaid, predictable, second place, late night comic, self-proclaimed devout Christian celebrating arson of a Christmas tree. There's what happened last night with Colbert.
The holiday season is in full swing already here in New York. The Christmas lights are burning bright, especially over at Fox News headquarters, where last night the Fox News Christmas tree was set on fire. Now, I know what you're thinking, but the ghost of Hugo Chavez has an alibi. Thankfully, no one was hurt. We're not talking about a couple of toasted pine cones here. Take a look. Crispy Kringles. Of course, this would never have happened if the tree had a gun. Come on. You gotta give a squirrel a gun or something like that. Fox News tried to warn us this was coming. Every time a store clerk says happy holidays, a Christmas tree bursts into flames.
In New York at midnight last night, the Fox News Christmas tree was engulfed in flames. The fire is believed to have started after Fox News' pants caught on fire. The fire is believed to have started because Judge Jeanine Pirro ate one too many rum balls and breathed on a cigarette.
Someone set fire to the 50-foot Christmas tree outside the Fox News studios. And it's not clear how this happened. I mean, it could be an accident, could be arson, could be Santifa. It's not clear. And unfortunately, we can't ask the tree because, like all Fox employees, it had to sign an NDA. And honestly, even calling this thing a tree is such a stretch. Because I don't know if you saw this. Once the flames went out, it turns out that this thing was just like scaffolding covered in pine needles. I'm sorry, but that's not a tree. That's just a jungle gym with a body hair problem.
All right. So, some of it was mildly funny, but it's the never end. That's all they will joke about is anything conservative. I mean, you would think that Joe Biden being incoherent would be a great source of material for late-night comics. They never do it, ever. That's how partisan they become. And it's reflected, they've got, they're barely, they're way under 2 million viewers, these shows a night. If you get to the Trevor Noahs and the Seth, what's that guy's name? Seth Meyers of the world. They're under 1 million viewers a night. These are broadcast channels. This was unheard of. Anyway, joining us to